No, because opium really isn't terribly addictive. I mean, the only time in history that opium was turned into a social problem was in the 19th century. Yes, just to review your history for you for a moment, in the 1840s, a series of international incidents went on in the Far East that have come to be called the Opium War. Well, what was the Opium War about? The British East India Company, which was nothing more than the profit-making arm of British imperialism, the British East India Company had created a huge distribution system for tea. Tea was grown in Ceylon, and they had very advanced ships for that time, over 200 of them, and they had they had facilities from Aden and Port Said, and all of this was maintained at great expense for the tea trade. Well, they were so efficient at producing tea that they created an economic collapse of tea around 1840. So the board of directors of the British India Company got together, and they said, we have all these ships, tea is worth nothing, what are we going to do? And then someone said, well, why don't we grow opium in Goa, which is in India, south of Bombay, on the west coast of India. Why don't we grow opium in Bombay and we'll sell it in China? And they said, well, that's a good idea. What does the Chinese government think about this? So they inquired, and the Chinese government told them to get lost, that they weren't interested in having raw opium sold at dockside by British traders in Chinese cities. Well, they went back to the Foreign Office, and the wheels turned, and gunboat diplomacy was used to force the Chinese to open their doors to opium. Opium had been known in China for thousands of years as an obscure item in the materia medica, but it had never been a social vice. From 1840 on, tens of thousands of tons of opium at rock-bottom prices were unloaded, produced by Indian cheap labor at immense profit to the East India Company, and unloaded in China. So, you know, we think that governments, this stance of being the keeper of moral values that is affected by government in the so-called drug war, is just another convenient foil, because when it suits government's purpose, it deals dope. Certainly, you know, the cocaine trade could only exist with the connivance of the Central Intelligence Agency. I mean, if you don't believe that, you don't understand how it works out there, because it's just as plain as the nose on your face. I mean, where do you get $500 million in a hurry if you've got to outfit a rebel army and topple a socialist, democratic socialist government somewhere? Well, the only place you get $500 million, or $100 million even in a hurry, is you take a flyer on drugs. The original cocaine epidemic was practically promoted by the media because coke was thought to be this rather fashionable little upper. It wasn't until people had been doing it for 5 or 6 years and exhibiting signs of madness, breakdown, and physical dissolution of the middle of their face that people began to catch on that it's not such a good thing. And then, of course, crack cocaine, that was not hatched by the agency. That was just the perverseness of human ingenuity that could take a problem and turn it into a real problem. Remember the great heroin epidemics of the past after the Vietnam War? Well, you should look at the police statistics on crack. Looking at the statistics as they now stand, it's like there were no drugs before crack. Crime levels were so low relative to what they are now. Burglaries, assaults were so rare And yet, when those events were going on, the great heroin epidemic of the 1970s and so forth, we were asked to believe, that society was being ripped apart at the seams. So it's all very relative, and it's all according to who it serves.